Hi, today I want to talk about a legacy video. I want to make a legacy video about the people that helped me grow up, shape my life. And I'm not sure what I'm going to title it yet. I'm thinking about the people who shaped my life, or it takes a village to raise a child. I haven't decided yet, but it might be a combination of both of those. Now, it takes a village to raise a child is from what I've understood, and I've looked it up, is a African proverb. Now, it hasn't been directly attributed to the Africans. However, it seems like it's that way. So that's the way it's going to be. Growing up, I was surrounded by people who, without even knowing it, shaped how I see the world. Some taught me through words, some through actions, and others just by how they lived their lives. Today, I want to share those people with you: my great grandmother, my grandparents, my parents, aunts, uncles, and even a few bosses and mentors along the way. This is my tribute to them and a little window into how I became, well, me. I can sing I was born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, but that's not the truth. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, back in December of 1946. And I remember my mother saying it was a snowy day when I was born. And I didn't realize how snowy it was. The other day, I got on some of the historical weather data and found out there was actually a blizzard of anywhere between 17 and 20 inches that accumulated in Newark, New Jersey on the day I was born. So here we go. Hopefully, it's going to be good. Again, I want to make this as a legacy that I can leave behind. So my children, my grandchildren, and my great grandchildren could look back at it and say, that was Grandpa's life. These are the people who shaped his life. This is who he talks about. These are some of the pictures that he shows us. It's not going to be a complete one because it'll take me days to go over everybody that's influenced me in my life. But I'm going to try to keep it within a reasonable amount of time. My parents, both of my parents were the foundation for me growing up. My mom, she had a way of making any house feel like a home. Always warm meals, a tidy kitchen, and listening ear when needed. She also had great strength. She was a glue that held everything together. She taught me empathy and that listening is sometimes more important than speaking. My mom was a working housewife. She had a 5 day a week job. She got up in the morning, caught the bus, and got home late in the afternoon or maybe 5 or 6 o'clock at night. She worked on an assembly line. She did government soldering, actually. When the first spacecrafts went up, they had these little instruments that had these, meters that went like that. Well, she did all the soldering work on that for a company called Weston Electrical Instruments. But when she came home at night, she cleaned, she cooked, she did whatever she had to do. She helped me with homework. She was nurturing until the day she died, and I always came first. She was more of a serious type person than my dad was, and she handled the finances. She always made sure I dressed in clean clothes and looked presentable at school and church. She was not afraid to discipline me. She was only 4'11", but she kept me in line. Believe me, I was afraid of her. She didn't hit me that often, but she punished me and she would yell at me and tell me I'm not doing this right or I'm not doing that right. But she wasn't overbearing. She let me do my own thing and kind of corrected me along the way. All right, let me get to my dad. My dad was the hardest working man I've ever known. He didn't just talk about responsibility, he lived it. He was up early, worked long hours as a truck driver, and still found time to fix things around the house. One night I asked why he never seemed tired, and he just said, because I've got you to take care of. And that's when I understood love wasn't just always in the words, it's in the doing. Let me get a little bit of the specifics about my dad. As I mentioned, he was a truck driver, but he had a tough life growing up. His parents died before he was 13 years old. Both of them did. And of course, he had a lot of brothers and sisters, and they took him in and they helped raise him as a child. And then when he was of age, he tried to join the Navy, but they didn't accept him. They wouldn't let him in medically because he had a steel plate in part of his head, and that was a result of a shovel incident where he got hit with a shovel when he was a kid. However, he joined the Merchant Marines, and he was part of towing ammunition barges across the channel during the D-Day invasion. My father was quite a character, but he was an excellent role model. He was always happy-go-lucky. He he taught me the importance of laughter and to pursue my dreams and ambitions. I'll give you what kind of example he was as far as laughter and quite a character. We would go to a store, and all of a sudden he'd say, "John, look up, look up." And I'd look up and he'd say, "Flying flock of tomatoes." And he'd be embarrassing the hell out of me. And he'd be laughing. And that's the way he was. He was serious to a certain point, but he was happy go lucky. And he didn't take anything from granted. My dad was a person who would give you the shirt off his back also. I remember him playing Santa Claus to the unfortunate kids at Christmas time. My neighbor that lived next door to us belonged to an Italian American club, and he and my father became good friends. And the neighbor always asked my father, "Hey, would you want to play Santa Claus for the kids?" And they'd have a big fun drive, and my father would go from house to house with all the food and whatever was collected, and knock on the door, or just if nobody was home, drop it on the doorstep, and make sure that these people that were unfortunate had whatever they needed for Christmas time. Another thing my father did, and my mother did not like it. I remember I was in college, and a car that I had was getting on in mileage. It had a little bit more mileage than it was worth taking care of. So he said to my mother one Saturday morning, "We got to get him another car because it's not reliable." I was commuting back and forth to college, and my mother said, "Okay." But Jack, that was his name. His name was John, but they called him Jack. You can't buy a new car. We don't have it." My father said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay." So we went to the local Pontiac Oldsmobile dealership in the town we lived in. And in the showroom was a shiny red 442 Oldsmobile, maxed out muscle car, four on the floor, white interior, beautiful car, bucket seats, twin exhaust, and all the makings of a muscle car. And I remember my father looking at it, and he said, "Oh, look at that, John." He said, "Wouldn't that be nice?" I said, "Yeah, we can't buy it. Dad, Mom will kill you." He said, "I don't care what your mother says." He said, "Uh, let's take it for a test ride." So we took it for a test ride. We got back to the dealership, and my father says to the salesman, "Okay, we'll take it." So the salesman looked at him and said, "You want it?" He said, "Yeah, I want it." I think the amount was about $2,400 or $2,700 back then. And my father financed it. He said, "I'll get my wife to sign the paperwork and I'll bring it back to you." So we went home with the car, and my mother took one look at the car in the driveway, and she came out and she said, she had a fit. She's, "Jack, I tell you, we can't afford a new car. You didn't buy it, did you?" He said, "Well, I signed a contract and I bought the contract for you to sign too." She said, "Well, how are we going to afford it?" My father said, "I'll just work another hour or two a day or whatever, overtime, and don't worry, we'll pay for it." And of course, during the summer when I worked to help myself gain some extra money, I put in a couple extra bucks to help myself afford that car. But that's the way my father was. My dad always took care to help me with my homework. Even though he worked late, he came home and he would sit down and help me with my homework to make sure got done. And he loved to work on projects with me. I remember this. We used to make these. I forgot, there was two rolls and put it in a box, and it was like a movie with a roll of brown paper going across it. And my father, even though he wasn't educated in the arts, he was a great artist, and he did all the artwork. I did all the coloring, and between the two of us, we did the printing on the project. And that was a source of satisfaction to my dad. And along with my mother, he was one of the forces that guided me as a guiding force in my life. They both make sure I went to college, even though I wanted to become a truck driver. My father said, you're not going to become a truck driver. I'm a truck driver. And if I had the chance to go to college, I'd be going to college. So you're going to college, come hell or high water. And they did. Another person that I'm going to get back to the matriarch of the family, my great grandmother. Now, my great grandmother, I think she lived to be 92 years old. And she was a working person. She didn't work outside the house, but she worked in the house all the time. She was always cooking. She was always tending to her beloved garden, uh, especially tomatoes. I mean, she had a great tomato and rose bush garden. She used to give me roses all the time to bring to the teachers, I guess to butter them up. Uh, and the day she died, they actually found her in her garden down on the ground. But she lived life to the fullest. She immigrated from Sicily with 4 children at the time. Uh, my great grandfather was already in the United States. I guess he was there for 2 years, and they saved up enough money to bring her and the kids over at that time. And they came over, I forgot the exact date, maybe it was 1906 or something like that. And the kids were all young. My great grandfather's name was Andreas, and my grandmother's name was Jacquemina or Jacqueline in English. My great grandmother was the typical Italian lady. She was short, relatively thin, and she had the silver white hair. She always had it in a bun, and she couldn't talk too much English. It was just a little bit of English. And her and I would communicate. I think I was the oldest grandchild that lived in the same house. We lived in a 3-story house. My mother, father, and myself lived on the first floor. My aunt and uncle with their 3 children, and my great grandmother, when she was alive, lived on the second floor. And then I had another aunt and my other Uncle Bucky that lived on the 3rd floor. So we were pretty close in proximity. The proudest day of my great grandmother's life is when she got her U.S. citizenship papers. I have a picture of that, and she was beaming from ear to ear. You know, a couple of things I can remember. Again, when I was a kid, she used to have these dried peppers that were hanging in the hallway, and evidently they were hot. And I wanted one. And she said, no, 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 too hot, or whatever she said in Italian. But me being stubborn, I insisted that I have one. So she gave me one, and I bit into it. Oh, God, the worst thing I ever did. And she just laughed and laughed and laughed. One of the things that she did every year was she held an annual feast of St. Joseph's at the house. Now, I'm not going to get all the details of the Feast of St. Joseph, but it was a feast that celebrated St. Joseph's life. And it was sometime in, I think it was March 17th of the year. And she would hold this feast, and she would be cooking and baking and accepting donations from the egg man, the milkman, from the bread man, for a week up to advance. And she invited all the local neighbors to come in to celebrate the feast. The day of the feast, actually had a feast where people would march with the St. Joseph statue on a rolling platform, and people would pin money to the statue. And then my great grandma would bring people upstairs, and sometimes people donated money, which she would give to the church, or donated food stuff, but anybody was welcome. Anybody that lived in a neighborhood. It could be Irish, Italian, Jewish, Black, uh, whatever nationality at the time, you were more than welcome. So when she passed away, my mother held up that tradition. I think she did it for maybe a year or two, but it just got to be too much. I know she had the help of my other aunts and uncles, but it was different then, and just didn't have the meaning of the Feast of St. Joseph. One other incident that I can remember during the feast, or actually before the feast, the priest would come to the home and it would bless the altar. Now, the altar had 3 tiers to signify the 3 stages of the Trinity. And the priest would bless it, and then all the food would be blessed. Now, the only thing is they didn't have meat because it was held during Lent. So meat was a no-no. So there was a lot of fish, different kinds of omelets and fruits and vegetables and salads and all this other kind of stuff. My great grandmother would designate a couple of the kids to be honorary saints for that day. And one of the saints was St. Joseph every year. So when it was my turn, I had to taste the food first. And I can remember she gave me a piece of this bacala. Now, for anybody that doesn't know what bacala is, it's dried, salted codfish, and it tastes horrible, absolutely terrible. So, me stuff it in my face, and I went like this. And when nobody was looking, I went like this and threw it under the table. Unbeknownst to me, great grandmother was standing behind me and she smacked me upside the head and she said, "No, no, no, that blessed food," or whatever she said in Italian. So, yeah, she was a tough cookie, but she was one of my guiding forces. The next group of people I want to talk about is my mother's father and mother, my grandmother and grandfather. I never got to know my father's father and mother because, as I said, they died when my dad was 13 years old. But I heard a lot about them from, things that my father would say. And I learned a little bit about them by researching on ancestry.com and things that I was able to uncover in some of the newspaper archives. Now, my grandmother and grandfather, both of them were always there for me. They took me on vacations, and I stayed over at their house numerous times. Speaking of vacations, we went to Florida a couple of times. We went to Saratoga Springs. We went to Canada. We went to Atlantic City. We went all over the place. I can still remember riding on the beach. My grandfather, when we got down to Daytona before we got to Miami, taking the car right on the beach. And against my grandmother's better judgment, my grandfather said, "We're going on the beach." So we did. And that was allowed back then. You could just free ride on the beach. And it was hard enough. You know how Daytona Beach is. But I think now you have to pay for it. Grandma taught me how to cook when I was younger. First off, when I was real young, she had me chopping vegetables and just throwing them in a pot. I can still remember chopping potatoes or chopping carrots. And the knife she gave me wasn't exceptionally sharp, but she told me to be careful. And a couple of times I've nicked myself, but it wasn't bad. Uh, but she taught me how to cook. And as I got older, she taught me the finer things of cooking. She was a great cook. She made excellent spaghetti sauce along with my grandfather. And I was the only one, I guess, that learned her recipe. I kept that recipe. And a couple of my cousins want the recipe, and I've given it to them. And I still make homemade spaghetti sauce, but not as often as I used to because it's just too time consuming. And getting back to my great grandmother, she used to make the real homemade, where she would take the plum tomatoes from her garden and puree them into tomato sauce. My grandmother and grandfather. Uh, we always went to their house for major holidays, and we'd be eating from noon to past dinner time. I remember at noon, we'd always eat raviolis because when I would stay with her overnight, she had me up at 6 o'clock in the morning helping her make the raviolis or maybe making them the night before. And that my job was to be putting the holes in them and turning them over so they'd dry on both sides. But we'd start eating at noon, and then late in the afternoon we would have the antipasta, and then we would have salad, and then we would have the main course. And after everybody was stuffed, after about an hour or so, we'd have dessert. And believe me, we were stuffed for the day. But that's how grandma and grandpa were. They didn't have a lot of money, but they wanted to make sure that they shared it with everybody. Now, my grandmother, she took me on many, many trips to downtown Newark and to New York City. She was a short lady, but she could move around pretty damn fast. I tell you what, and she tested my little legs at the time. And I still laugh about how she used to walk me ragged. I mean, she used to really walk me ragged all over the place. She took me on a lot of boat rides up the Hudson River to Rye, New York. And I can remember when I was a kid, I was playing with, these little reinforcement circles that you use for 3-ring binders to the holes to keep them from ripping out. Well, I was playing with a box, and Grandma said, put them back, and I did. Well, lo and behold, we got down the street, and I took out this box, and she said, where'd you get that? I said, in the store. She said, you steal it. I said, I went like this, and I was panicked. I knew better, but I didn't know better. So she grabbed me by the hand. She brought me right back into the store, right to the front clerk, who happened to be the owner of the store. And she said, you tell her what you did. And I looked at the lady and I said, I took it off the shelf and I put it in my pocket. So the woman said, that's all right. You brought it back. No harm. And she was going to give it to me. And my grandmother said, nope, he's got to learn a lesson. So she didn't allow her to give it to me. And that's a lesson. And I'm going to be 79 years old soon. And I was probably 6 or 7 back then. That's a lesson that I've learned and kept it in my mind for 73 years. My grandfather, I worked with him at the same company while I was in college. He worked, and back then you worked for a company pretty much for a lifetime. And I think Grandpa was there for 35 years. And he was getting close to retirement, but I was a source of pride to him. And he knew everybody in the plant. The plant was huge. It was Celanese Plastics in Newark, and it encompassed probably 3 or 4 blocks. And Grandpa, took pride, like I said, in having me there. And everybody that knew me working there for the summer knew I was Sam's kid. So they should take care of me, not mess with me. Grandpa was always patient with me, teaching and guiding me through life growing up. He instilled a great work ethic and sense of responsibility in me. And I still remember some of those words that he talked, about having integrity, doing the right thing, doing what you're supposed to be doing. All right, the next greatest influences in my life lived upstairs from me, and that was my Uncle Sonny and my Aunt Grace. Now, this is a little bit of a complicated relationship. My Uncle Sonny was also my father's brother, and his name was Charles. And my father's nickname for him was Bubble Ass. God only knows why. And my Uncle Sonny's nickname for my father was Meathead. I could probably understand that. And my Aunt Grace, who my Uncle Sonny's wife, was my grandfather's sister, or my mother's aunt. So that's a little bit complicated, but I hope you understand it. My Uncle Sonny and Aunt Grace, they lived upstairs from us. She was also my godmother. Even though they had 3 children of their own, they always made me feel special and treated me as one of their own. Uncle Sonny, he was quite a character. He was like my father. He was devil may care. They were the 2 youngest in their family, and they had a great attitude as far as living life. They would both drink beer on weekends, not to the excess, but they would both have a good time. And their responsibilities were to their families, and they took very good care of us. But that was just their mentality, fun mentality. Uh, my Uncle Sonny, he was, like I said, he was quite a character. I remember one Saturday morning hearing a lot of banging going on in the hallway. And I opened up the door, and my father came behind me, and he said to my uncle, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm building a scaffold. He had a whole bunch of old doors, and he was building this scaffold so he can get up. The ceiling was very high in the hallway, and he needed to get up high enough so he can do the painting. So my father said, okay, if you need any help, let me know. My uncle said, nah, I'm good. No sooner did my dad close the door, all of a sudden we heard crash, bang. My father opened up the door to the hallway, and my uncle was laying under these doors. And my father says, Bubble Ass, are you all right? Are you all right? My uncle said, yeah, just help me get these damn things off of me. But that was my uncle. Another incident, and I can still remember this vividly. He was on crutches for some reason. I don't remember exactly why. And we had these real steep stairs coming from the second floor down to the first floor. And I was on the second floor with him, and he said, "Do me a favor, Johnny." He said, "When I start heading down the stairs, open up the front door so I don't have to wait." I said, "Okay, Uncle Sonny." So I got down the stairs, opened up the door that was out the front porch, and my uncle started coming down with his crutches. All of a sudden, he started gaining momentum, gaining more speed, more speed. So before you knew it, he was down the stairs, hit that first landing, and landed on the front porch. And I looked at him. I said, "You all right, Uncle Sonny?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "Just help me get up." And he didn't break anything, fortunately, but that's the kind of person he was. Now, my Aunt Grace, she was, again, she was my godmother, and she lived to be 97 years old. I believe she was only 5 days short of it. And she was special to me. She loved me like her own child, and she gently disciplined me when I was misbehaving. She always cared for me to the best of her ability. She always watched out for me. And to this day, my cousin said, you know, her mother, mom said to me, "Always confide in John. He'll give you the best advice." So I feel honored for having her say that to her own daughter over her own two brothers. But that's the way my aunt was, and I miss all my family that are no longer here immensely. Two other people that I want to talk about or that influenced me throughout my period of adjustment and growing up was my Aunt Clara and Uncle Al. That was my mother's sister and her husband. Now, they had four of their own children, but they lived not a great distance from us, but you had to take several buses to get to the east side of Newark where they lived. We lived on the west side. We got to see them on all the holidays and other times throughout the year. And, you know, Grandpa would take us over there to see them. And once my father got a car, he would take us over to see them, and they would come to visit us on occasion. So I got to know my other four cousins pretty well, however, not as well as the cousins that lived directly upstairs from me. Now, Aunt Clara took care of me when I was younger. I don't know if she worked at that time. Maybe she was too young, but my mother worked, and Aunt Clara was responsible for taking care of me. I remember one day she was trying to trim my hair, and she turned her head to do something, and I grabbed the scissors and I cut it, and I took off probably about this much. And when she turned around, she's, "Oh, God, your mother's going to kill me." And I looked at her and I just smiled. I said, "I did it. I did it." She said, "Yeah, I know you did it." But my mother didn't get upset with her as long as I didn't cut myself and hurt myself. One thing I can remember about her, she was a really a gentle person. She was very easygoing. She wasn't as intense as my mother. My mother was a little bit more intense, a little bit more driven. Aunt Clara was very easygoing. One of the things I vividly remember, and I have a picture of it somewhere. One Easter Sunday, she bought me this huge Easter bunny, and it was probably 4 feet tall at the time. And I could still remember her giving me that and posing for that picture. Now, Uncle Al was a great role model. He always took me to the annual Westside High School versus Irvington High School game on Thanksgiving Day. That was one of the traditions that we went to every year. And that was before we had to go back to Grandma's house for all the pigging out for Thanksgiving dinner. Uncle Al, unfortunately, he had some health issues and he wasn't as strong as he always was, but he always took good care of me. He taught me right from wrong. And he would give you the shirt off his back and then some. And I'll never forget these people. Now, a couple of the other people that I want to talk about is when I got older and I got into a job that really meant something to me. I had a boss by the name of Ray Tice. And I worked for a company called E.R. Squibb and Sons on the packaging line. I was supervisor at the time. And when Ray hired me, he took me under his wing, even though he had two of his own sons. I don't know why he took me under his wing, but because I was an athlete, because I played softball and things like that, he nicknamed me Jock, and he would say, "Jock, you got to do this, you got to do that." He taught me so much about navigating the corporate system. He took me by the hand and guided me through the unions and the negotiation with the unions and how to deal with them on a daily basis. He kept me out of trouble, basically. He was an excellent role model, and I'll never forget him. He was very instrumental in helping me grow up. Two couple other people that really had a great influence on me in life was some of my teachers and actually some of the nuns when I was going through First Communion and confirmation. Some of my teachers, and I'll name two of them, were Miss Liss, who taught music. And she was very, very patient and attributed my love for music because of her. And then I had a fifth grade teacher. Her name was Miss Kirby, and she was a sweetheart. I probably had a crush on her at the time, but she taught me a lot of things as far as how to be a good student, how to study, how to do this, and how to do that. And, you know, it wouldn't be this tribute if I didn't name those two. Now, getting back to nuns, I had one nun called Sister Adele, and she was the stereotypical hardliner nun, and she kept everybody in line. I think it was in First Communion that I had her, maybe even into confirmation. And her habit was very tight around her face, and all you could see was her glasses and her round face. And if you talked or misbehaved during their classes, she would sneak up behind you with a ruler and smack you upside on the hand or in the back of the head with a ruler. She didn't take any pity on anybody. You did it her way. And she commanded respect, and she deserved it. The other nun, and I forgot her name, she was a younger nun. She had just gotten into becoming a nun, and she was the person who played the organ. And when the other sisters weren't around, she would play whatever good music was at the time, much to the amusement of all of us on the organ. So, yeah, I really liked her. She was nice. Now the last two people, and they're still instilling in me a sense of direction, and that's my two sons. Even though they're 55 and 53, I could still remember vividly when my 55-year-old son was born. It changed my life. I could still remember the sensation, the hair on the back of my neck going up, the speechlessness, the sense of pride, and actually starting to tear up the first time I laid eyes on him. And I said to myself, God, I made or was part of this creation of making this child. Now I really have to grow up. And my son John was probably the turning point in me really growing up. I think I was 24 years old when he was born. And you're not mature at 24. You think you are, but you're not. But that changed everything for me. Equally as important was my son Brian. He was born 22 months after that. And same type of effect. Now, you don't take as many pictures of your second son as you do your first son because you're so damn busy all the time. And I was always busy with the kids. I was always busy at work, getting home from work late. But as my father did, I was always there to help them with their homework, to do things on weekends with them, to draw, to show them how to fix things. And that was part of my responsibility as a parent. I wasn't their good friend. You don't become good friends with your children. You become a parent, and that's important. You could become friends with your kids, but being a parent is so important. And I see a lot of that happen right now. People are not parents. They're just friends with their kids, and kids walk all over them. But before I forget, this is John from In John's Universe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end it right now. Now, there's a lot of people that I probably didn't mention in this video, and I'll think about it later, and maybe I'll do a subsequent video as a legacy video as part two to this one, so I can have it, or my heirs can have it for posterity's sake. In closing, when I look back, I see a patchwork quilt of influences, each person a different square, stitched together to make the fabric of my life. The patience of my great-grandmother, the laughter of my grandparents, the work ethic of my father, the kindness of my mother, the encouragements of aunts, uncles, bosses, teachers, and nuns, They didn't just raise me, they shaped me into the person that I am today. And if I'm lucky, I can pass a little bit about what they gave me onto the people in my life today. Thank you for letting me share them with you. All right, so that's it for today. If you have subscribed already, I appreciate it, and I hope you found this video enjoying. And if you haven't subscribed and you just stumbled upon the channel, please, I'd appreciate you subscribing. Down at the bottom, right here somewhere, where the heck is it? Down here somewhere is a thumbs up button. So if you see that thumbs up button, please click on it. That means that you like this video. Even if you don't subscribe to the channel, I'd appreciate it. That helps with our YouTube algorithm. Also, on this side over here, there's a notifications bell. If you click on that notifications bell, you'll be notified whenever I put up a new video. It'll say in John's Universe, put up a new video. If you have any comments, please leave comments. I know people like looking at some of the comments, and when you put a comment in, everybody shares in it. Everybody sees what you put in. And I've seen some people put in comments back to other people's comments. And that's good because it's great to share your stories with people. So if you have a comment, and I kept saying this before, good, bad, or indifferent, please put in a comment. Now, the last thing I want to reference is the training course that I'm going to be talking about, or actually the training course that I'm going to be teaching about YouTube for seniors. And that's probably about 2 weeks off. I may put up a video next week preempting it, giving you a little bit of background information that you'll want to prepare yourself for, but I haven't decided how I'm going to do this yet. So again, thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate it. And everybody have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.